We're live.
Anjad?
Anjad?
Oh, perfect. I do see it on Eventos. Great, and I think we can give it to like a couple minutes after the hour. Mike, I love the conversation you guys did with the festival in Seattle. That was the last one.
Yeah. We were in rare form that night.
That was great.
It was the end of a long week.
One of the reasons I was tempted to see if Amin was available as well, but we'll probably have him in December, which would be great.
Yeah, I'd like to, if it's inshallah, if it's possible and okay with you, I'd like to do all of the Arab actors.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to do Haz, Amin, Patrick, and Rula. I know it will mean a lot to them for sure.
Definitely.
That's it. We are live. Silence is never.
It's golden. What are you talking about?
I feel like we should have some music on, and
I can play something. Well, can I play something? Not like elevator waiting music, but something from the soundtrack of the film.
So let's go ahead and we can get started. Great. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have here the director extraordinaire, Mike Mosallam. Hopefully, everyone's been able to catch the film this weekend. If not, the film is still available till 10 p.m. Pacific on our new Arab virtual platform. I'd love to now turn it over. I'd love to introduce Bishoy, who is one of our programmers here at the Arab Film and Media Institute, and would love to get started. If you have any questions for Mike or for us, please drop it in Facebook, YouTube, or on our Lexhour virtual platform. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Serge, and thank you for joining us, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was lovely having this film for our audiences, and it's been a favorite of ours because we showed the short version of the film a couple years back at the AFF.
Our world premiere.
Yeah. So now the baby's all grown up. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your process, kind of bringing this film to our audiences, and sort of changing it from a short film to a feature length.
Yeah, absolutely. When the genesis of the short really started in a coffee shop here in LA, as most films do, where a friend of mine asked me sort of who best represented me or my friends' journeys in film and TV, and frankly, you know, I couldn't think of any film or television program where the idea of the intersectionality of one's sexual identity and their faith and spirituality worked harmoniously, especially you know, when you intersect homosexuality with Islam. It's definitely not something where people jump to, oh yeah, that's joyous, let's, you know, that's fun and cool. Typically those types of stories are shrouded in shame and secrecy and a lot of self-hatred. And I really just started to think about the privilege of my own life and my devotion to my faith and God, and also my comfortability in my own sexual identity. And I was never really a writer, but I thought, oh, interesting, why don't I try something out? And this story kind of just poured out of me. And that's how we have, alhamdulillah, that's how we have the short. And the short played very well in the festival circuit, of course, starting with the Arab Film Festival, which we're very grateful for. And it went on to play other festivals. It played Cannes. And then we got a lot of interest about that story and saying, like, what happens next? We need to know more about these folks. Where are they going? And the short, for those who haven't seen, is really the first night of Ramadan. And so we established a pretty great convention to use. And as we started to develop what the feature might look like, which is not something we had thought of when we were doing the short, we really started to think about, you know, here we have this convention of the holy month of Ramadan, and what might we do over the entirety of that month and what that might look like. And I think one of the things that I've always sort of been interested in, both in my personal life and on screen, is the idea that we can sort of take a narrative and sort of like twist it on its head a little bit. And I think to have a gay rom-com set during the month of Ramadan is subversive unto itself, without ever missing the beats of the tropes of a rom-com. But also, I think to have a queer film that isn't based in the sexualization of its characters, that's not based in sort of when are they going to sleep together, kind of also is really exciting to me. And Ramadan was kind of the perfect convention for that, because it's already a chaste time for so many Muslims that it allowed for our characters to be chaste.
You're right. There's a real purity in the relationship between Cal and Mo and the way it develops. And I think that's part of the brilliance of using Ramadan and fasting as a narrative device.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess to that, you know, each of the characters that the film follows experience the holy month differently. Experience their sexuality, their faith, and their Arab identities differently. So I'm wondering how the film seeks to insist on, you know, a space for nuance between these differing experiences.
I love this question and I'm so grateful for it. I don't know if it needs to insist more than it just needs to exist, because in our mere existence, we are nuanced and not monolithic. There's as a gay man, there's plenty about the queer community that I still have to learn. And as an Arab American, I can't help but feel privileged to have freedoms that I think other gay Arabs don't have. And I think for me, it was really, really important to not just have a singular lens that thwarted maybe a narrative that we are used to seeing on TV, but also kind of exposed what I like to call kind of a triangulation between Mo, our lead character, his best friend Sam, and Hassan, Mo's ex, because I think what's really important is that we show that the experience of being Arab, the experience of being Muslim, and the experience of being queer are unto themselves a massive spectrum of experiences, right? You could tell that story 100,000 different ways. But as you start to intersect those identities, I think even, that you've grown in terms of the kinds of stories you can tell exponentially. So I really wanted to create a version of life where people from different tribes were intersecting. And, with Mo, he sits in a very privileged place. His faith and his identity do not fall in conflict with one another. He's got a great supportive family. He's got a great job. He doesn't really need anyone. All he really needs to do is figure out how to get out of his own way, which most of us as human beings, regardless of our identifiers, need to figure out. And his best friend, Sam, who is essentially the voice of reason in this film, has taken a path where the spectrum of his faith and his identity, and his sexuality veers more towards the LGBT community. And he's sort of kept his own experience with his faith internal, and it's not really for anybody else. And it's, and he understands the culture of it as well as the nuance of it. And then there's Hassan, who has sort of gone in the opposite direction, where he leans into the cultural pressures and the familial pressures and suppresses a part of him. And I think, what's always so hard about any of those identities is you're never being your full self. And, I'm not a philosopher, but when God created us, he didn't create incomplete beings. He completed whole beings. And so we should wholly express ourselves.
You're right. And I think this film does show these characters not just in their multiplicities and in their interactions, but in their fullness as people who make mistakes, who hurt one another, but who ultimately really come back to one another. And I also don't think that even their expressions of piety can be singled out as like, oh, this one is practicing piety, practicing his faith the right way, and this one is not. I think a lot about the scene at the Islamic Center of Los Angeles, where Mo and Sam are gathering to honor a lost loved one, and the way in which Sam enters the Islamic Center of Los Angeles, performs his prayer, kind of brushes off but notices the way in which people are speaking about him behind his back, but still is present within the prayer, I think is a really beautiful way to acknowledge that character's internal dynamic of faith, his navigation of that space, and the fact that it's not that Sam is the wild best friend. It's that he's grounded within his own practice. I guess I just want to hear more about before we get into kind of Ramadan in general as a narrative device and as a theme for this film. I want to hear more about that scene, and I mean, first, what it was like shooting at the Islamic Center of Los Angeles, because one of the coolest things about this film.
Yeah, thank you. I agree, and I'm so grateful for all of them. First, I just want to sort of say I think any analysis I could give of that scene would never be as good as the one you just did. So thank you for having such a great take on this film and also on that scene in specific, and especially the character of Sam, who was definitely my favorite character to write. But I think I won't lie. I was initially like, we are going to have to find some random cultural center that is not specific to being Arab and or being Muslim, and we're going to have to set decorate the heck out of it. because I couldn't imagine a world where a mosque would allow us to film this scene. And we were introduced to some of the ops team at the mosque. I actually kind of get a little emotional thinking about it, to be honest with you, because it was like most things in this film and in the production of this film, felt like it was divinely ushered. There are so many things about this film and in its creation that really feel like God was guiding us. And this scene in particular is one of them, where we got to the mosque and they were just so warm, so wonderful to us. It was our one of our bigger extra days, and we had all of these brown extras, some of whom were Muslim, some of whom were not, some of whom were stepping into a mosque for the first time. The amount of respect that everybody showed, the amount of care that everybody showed to learn the prayer that is said in Mass at the beginning of that scene. And also what's great is that it's written from a perspective of how I grew up going to Muslim funerals. And there were so many people there who was like, oh yeah, oh, that does happen. And it sort of gelled this large crowd of extras really nicely together. And we gave the mosque the scene ahead of time. They read the scene and they agreed to let us do it. And we did it on a Saturday when they were, not closed, obviously, but there were less foot traffic. And we took over a room. And I just remember thinking I would never find a space in my life to bridge these parts of me. And to be in that mosque in this scene was really emotional. To go and pray in the prayer room during our breaks was really emotional. When people were at lunch, to sort of sit in the stillness of my own faith in that moment was really emotional. I'm getting, why are you doing this to me, Bishoy, right now? We were towards the end of the day. An older gentleman came in and he started to do the call to prayer in the beautiful recitation. And one of our producers asked him if we could record him and use it. And he said, yes. And his is the voice that you hear in that scene. It was probably one of the most meaningful filmic moments I've ever had in my whole career.
Thank you so much for sharing it and being so forthcoming. It does sound divinely ordained.
It really was.
Yeah, and I think it gets really at the heart of the real power of this film in speaking frankly and intimately about religion, sexuality, cultural identity in honest and humorous and poetic ways. I'm wondering if we have any questions from audience members on Facebook, YouTube, or Eventive about divine intervention, about a little bit more nuts and bolts. Serge, we got.
So one that came in, just to continue on the last question, was, well, how has the response been from the Muslim community?
The response has been wonderful. We're rounding the end of our festival run, and thank God we've by the end of it we will have played over 60 film festivals worldwide, and we were able at the beginning of this 2020 life that we're living right now. Just before we went into lockdown, we were able to have 2 in-person screenings. One in San Jose, our world premiere was at CineQuest, and then after the very next day, we LA premiered here at Outfest Fusion. And so what was again one of those sort of divine moments was we were able to experience this film in 2 sold out houses with different audiences, sometimes more Muslim than others, sometimes more Arab than others, sometimes more gay than others. And I think what's beautiful is that consistently the laughs have all been in the right places. Maybe sometimes with a more Arab audience, the mom gets a few more laughs, but she's perfect regardless. But what has probably been the most touching to me are the people who either have come up to me after those screenings or have taken the time to reach out either via email or Facebook and say, I never thought I would see myself represented. I never thought I would see a family that talks and looks like my family. I think people, especially in the Arab community, are really responding to the sort of Arabish of the film and the ease of which people can glide in and out of English and Arabic. And that was really important to me when I was writing it, because it's so natural to how I communicate with my Arab community. And I think, like, listen, I think it's a miracle unto itself that a film like this got financed, funded, and made. And so whatever is meant to happen to it in its next life, I think in a way feels almost like a cherry on top to the response that we've already gotten. I mean, I don't know many other Ramadan rom-coms out there, and I certainly don't know any. And I don't mean this to be sort of like funny or like whatever, but I think like the fact that a film like this has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes is like kind of indicative of people sort of appreciating what this film stands for, whether or not they think it's a perfect film. I don't think that's the point. But I hope that, as many people as possible get to see it, and as many people can feel themselves seen in it in the way that I yearn to be seen and why it ultimately came to be.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from the audience, Serge? In the meantime, I have a question about. Oh no. Well, I wanted to hop onto this idea of a Ramadan rom-com, because I think watching television or watching movies is so central a part of the Ramadan experience.
Yeah, totally.
It's like the peak season of Egyptian musalsalat or telenovela soap opera.
Where do you stand on Bab al-Hara?
I haven't seen enough Bab al-Hara. I've seen like 1 or 2 seasons of Bab al-Hara, and I haven't. It's a saga. Where do you stand on Bab al-Hara?
I'm a fan. Yeah, I mean, I think it's binge worthy, and it's also like, repeat watching worthy.
Right.
And it might be over the top, but it is based in some reality. Let me tell you.
That it is. And if these streaming platforms want to know what good binge-worthy Arab content is, start with Bab al-Hara.
Yeah, totally.
They're listening to us. But I think that as a genre is it's they're made in 30 episode spurts, and they're made intentionally with these dramatic, like, emotional highs and lows. Yeah. I think it's different than an ordinary soap opera because I think they know people are fasting or living the chaste month and like are sort of primed for this kind of content. But there's an emotional animation about it, and a continuity that I don't think exists in normal weekly soaps.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious as to how you see Breaking Fast as fitting into the epic genre of Ramadan binge-worthy television and film, and the epic genre of the American rom-com. I mean, it's so classically West Hollywood in moments, and it's so classically, the superhero references, chasing waterfalls. Like it's so classically American theater and filmic canon.
Well, lest we forget, Superman is probably the most famous immigrant. So that's not without intentionality that he is the reference.
Thank you. I don't know my Superman trivia, but
No. To answer your question, I think it's a little bit easier for me to answer the latter half of it first. When I I've said this a lot, and like I feel so annoying saying it, but I'm just going to say it again because it's just true. It's just true. So much of what I've learned about love and how to love and accept love and reject love and run away from love is really from Julia Roberts and like the rom-coms and her canon of rom-coms in the 90s. And I think all I ever wanted was to accept love and be loved and reject love and run back to love in the same way that was so mellifluous for her. And so I really just wanted to write something that felt like if Julia Roberts were a gay Arab Muslim man living in West Hollywood, like what would that story be? And in the end, we learned that she would be Hasley Man. I mean, that's that part of it for me. Like, I think the American rom-com is really what has informed so much of culture and generation on what love should look like. And I think like, love can look like that, or it doesn't have to look like that for everybody, but at least everyone should have the option for it to look like that for them if that's what they choose. In terms of where does it fit into the Ramadan canon, I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer for that question, but wouldn't it be so fun to reconceive Breaking Fast into like 30, 28-minute spurts of story, crazy high and low energy story about these folks. So I don't know, Bishoy, maybe we'll write it one day.
We'll get our producers on it.
Yeah.
Serge, I want to throw it back to you.
Sure. We've had a few questions come in. This one I'm about to post is from Sarah, and she asks, did you intentionally see West Hollywood, Los Angeles as a character in the film? It's interesting because I watched the recent conversation with you and Mike at the Seattle, I think it was the Seattle Queer Film Festival. Yeah, I'd love for you to sort of expand on that question and
sure.
The role of West Hollywood.
Yeah. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for asking. Yes, the answer, the short answer is absolutely. West Hollywood plays a very specific character in this film because it is the backdrop, it's the heartbeat, it's the pulse of the experience that informs all of these characters' lives. I think West Hollywood, like I think it has equal parts specificity to the vibe of West Hollywood that's important to hit in a film like this, and also universality in that when you enter any big city and there's a gayborhood, sort of what the sort of hierarchy of life in that gayborhood is. But specifically, West Hollywood has a very specific hierarchy, and it's one in which our lead character doesn't feel like he fits in very well into. Yeah, it was. I mean, I think in that particular conversation that you're referencing, Serge, I also should stop calling you Serge. I think that we were talking about, could this film just be plopped in New York and be the same film? And in reality, I don't think that it could be, because the vibe of New York and the vibe of, say, Chelsea or Hell's Kitchen is just so different. The pace is different. The people are different. That, the people in this film are so specifically and authentically from Los Angeles and West Hollywood.
Yeah, I remember when that question came up in that conversation. I immediately was like, I couldn't have imagined this film set anywhere else. So
there was a very early on a producer who we spoke with, who offer to get us financing for the film if we in fact moved it to New York. And it's, you know, it sounds like kind of weird to say no to financing for an indie film, but also it just wasn't the same movie. We weren't writing the same movie anymore. So we were comfortable in keeping it in West Hollywood.
So we have another question I'd like to throw at you, Mike. So this is from Bianca. Let me put it up on the screen. Thank you for such an engaging film and interview. What projects do you have in the works now, Mike?
Thank you, Bianca. I am working on a couple of TV projects that I'm hoping will get announced soon. I also, over quarantine, have been able to complete my second feature, which is a far departure from my first. It's about a 12-year-old boy who is forced to live on his brother's college campus, and he gets to experience college through the lens of his alpha male brother, and he is anything but. And he has a very overbearing maternal figure in his life that is sort of adding to a lot of the dynamic and humor. You know, that pitch that I just gave was terrible. It's a really funny film, but you'll see it soon, hopefully, inshallah. But and then you know, 10 years next year, 10 years will be the 10-year anniversary of this show, All American Muslim, and we're hoping to engage some folks in some sort of reboot of some kind, inshallah.
Thank you, Serge. Thank you, Mike, for these wonderful and thoughtful answers. I wanted to pick up on something I think you were referencing in an earlier answer about the very specific hierarchy in neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
I think that hierarchy is not just about, you know, what your body looks like or your socioeconomic status, but it is a, you know, distinctly racialized hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes on different forms. So I wonder first, in what ways is Breaking Fast seeking to disrupt that hierarchy? I think we see Sam and Mo navigate their sex lives, their dating lives, their lives in this neighborhood very differently, and I think there's a lot of implicit. I think that I'll let you speak on it, and then I want to talk a little bit more specifically about Mo and Cal's relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if it's trying to disrupt it more than it is comment on it. Comment on its existence in a way that I think even when you give it voice, people are like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, maybe this is something we should continue to explore amongst our own little pods of people. But I also think there's something to be said about the way in which Mo and Sam, who are both not at the top of the hierarchy of West Hollywood, approach the very notion of it, and that is sort of Mo decides to sort of distance himself from it, and as a result feels and is alienated, and Sam is like jumping into the middle of it and saying like, I know exactly where I fit in here and I will thrive within that structure. And I think that's kind of the choices when you're not at the top of that list. The other thing that we're also kind of exploring in this film is the idea that people like Mo may feel like they know everything there is to know about the structure, and when they can stand just a little to the left of their own egos, maybe they'll meet someone who is going to show them a different path.
I like that. Thank you. I commenting on it in very acute and keen ways, I should say as well. So Mo does meet someone. I mean, Mo meets Cal, and I think there's a lot of very interesting dynamics in their relationship. I think part of it is that Cal grew up in Jordan, like everyone who takes Arabic in college, you know. not grew up in Jordan, but everyone who takes Arabic in college has, in the U.S. at least, has a jaunt in Jordan. So we can name
That's a
that.
good point. That's so true.
Oh my God, it's the strangest thing. I entered like a modern Arabic prose and poetry class with Mona Prince, and it's just like everyone's come back from Amman, talking about the one mall, talking about the one bar with Taco Tuesdays or something. And I've lost all of the, like, I feel like I'm an outsider to this Arabic language class.
That's
because
awesome. That's
because
so funny.
it's very funny. But Cal's experiences in Jordan are I think a bit more substantive. There's a particularity to growing up on a military base in Jordan. There's a particularity to his relationship with his father, and working through kind of histories of abuse and trauma. And Mo, has a great relationship with his family. The trauma he's working throughout the film is, his loss of Hassan and his loss of his teta, his grandmother. And so they meet, and there's mutual support, there's mutual care, there's flirtation. But would you say that they're healing one another? Would you say that they're helping to save one another? I'm very curious as to how you sort of conceived and architected their dynamic.
Again, there's no better analysis than yours. So I'm only going to add to what you're saying. I'm not going to try to improve upon it because you are really pretty perfect. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The thing is, I would unequivocally say that Cal does not save Mo, because in the instance where he could, or Mo won't allow it. And really, and this is really important to me, the only person or people who are able to do that breakthrough are his family, his chosen family, the people that he has allowed into this very thin layer of vulnerability, and at the forefront of that is his best friend Sam. And it really is, as much as it is a love story between Mo and Cal, it is a love story between these brothers of Sam and Mo. And so I think, in a way, if we always will be healed by those who we allow in, and Sam and Cal has definitely more work to do than just a month. I mean, he's pretty far along at the end of that month, but essentially, it's taken Sam a lifetime of a friendship to really get to penetrate those walls. And I think that we reach a certain age and we sort of stop wanting to listen to our parents, even though we probably should, until the day we die. But I really think that it's Sam who saves Mo in the end. He is the one who says, here's the reality, X, Y, and Z. Why aren't you listening? And and we don't see Mo do a lot of apologizing in this film until he apologizes to Sam. And I think that's intentional and important. And I don't think either of these guys save each other. I think they both they learn to sit in the shit together. And I think that's really where any kind of progress is made, is not the fix. It's the just hugging the wound.
Thank you for that. Caressing it. Yeah. Holding space for, dissimilar experiences.
And maybe just not knowing, just holding space for not knowing, and being uncomfortable with not having a plan, and just sitting in that discomfort and knowing that you will be okay.
Right. And I think that that's also a very poignant point of growth between Sam and Mo, because I'm thinking about the double date iftar dinner, in which Mo is being confronted by some really hard realities. Sam is speaking from his experience of homophobia, of violence, and Mo gets defensive.
For a lot of reasons. No, I mean, obviously for the reasons of wanting to defend his version of his faith, but also don't embarrass me in front of this guy that I like, and don't, keep me on my pedestal. My ambassador is still here, and I don't want him to see the real me yet. I want to hook him first. And Sam is going, if he's going to love you at all, he's going to love all of you. So if he can't love you like this, then move along. It's time to find someone else.
Absolutely. I could keep talking about that scene, but I want to give our audience some time, because I'm sure they have thoughtful and wonderful questions as well.
Yeah, and I think we're at that point too. We can maybe have a couple of more questions. Mike, I'd like one. I haven't typed it in, but just someone asking in terms of when will the next potential screening of the film? What's
so
next?
We are keeping our website breakingfastfilm.com very up to date in terms of all of the upcoming screenings. And in a virtual world, most of us have learned that screenings are either geo-blocked to the geography of the hometown of that festival, or they're sort of expanded and they're available in all of the US. Our festival run is coming to an end probably in the next month or so, because we are luckily, thank God, getting ready for our wide release at the end of January, inshallah, in 2021. So if you miss us in the next few months on the festival circuit, definitely stay tuned, and inshallah take about 70 or 80,000 of your relatives to the theaters, if theaters are a thing, or on a streaming platform, and catch us there.
And we can end on this one. Funny, let's see. It's from Muhammad. That's not popping up, is it? 1 second. It's from Muhammad. It says, "Is there a reason why the main character was referred to as Mo throughout the film versus Muhammad?"
Would you prefer Hamoudi? I don't know if there's a reason other than it's fairly common to create diminutives of English Arabic names. I was born Michael, and people call me Mike. But Muhammad, your name is beautiful. I'm sure you are beautiful. And when I'm in trouble with my parents, I am a Muhammad Ali.
Wonderful.
Can I just say one quick thing? That question reminds me when we premiered at their film festival 4,000 years ago with the short, and we did a Q&A. Someone asked me, why is Mo praying with a tank top on, or a wife beater on? Why is he wearing that? And I thought, oh, people are just, we have to, but he was. We corrected the issue in the future.
Wonderful. Bishoy, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I suppose my closing thought and kind of invitation is thanking you and saying Mabruk, Alf Mabruk, congratulations on this film, which honors queer experiences, I think honors Ramadan, and honors their meeting, that's it. Thank you.
And wallah, believe me when I tell you, and I'm trying not to get emotional again, because Bishoy, you pulled it out of me twice today. I will never, no amount of gratitude you can give me will ever match my gratitude to AFMI and Serge and everybody there for what you've done for all iterations of this film, and also Bishoy for your unbelievably touching and poignant analysis of it. And I'm just so moved by how people can view what is supposedly kind of a funny romp and really have a nice, meaningful discussion about it. So thank you both so very much.
Thank you.
No, Mike, it's going to be my turn to get emotional, but we are so incredibly proud of you, your entire cast and crew. A film like this really reminds us of why we even launched something like the Arab Film and Media Institute, that we can bring spaces for, voices from our communities that often don't get, and stories that often don't get told. So again, we're incredibly proud of you. We can't wait to see what's next. For all of our audience, I would say this was when I saw the working feature, it was an immediate decision on my part. I thought we would open our film festival this year to screen this film at the Castro Theater. I've shared this with you, Mike. I know the times doesn't call for that now, but that's something once, inshallah, when everything gets back to normal, to be able to screen this in the historic Castro Theater. But beyond that, we're so incredibly proud, and best of luck.
Thank you. We'll all be there together, inshallah.
Yes.
Next year in San Francisco.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Thank you both. Thank you, Bishoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this new platform. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.